how you doing? I'm Chuck Holton, and this is a Hot Zone. I'm sorry I missed Friday's Friday's Hot Zone. I have just been so busy traveling, and I actually forgot it was Friday. So forgive me for that. Here is what I've been doing. The Hot Zone is basically a whole bunch of people wanted to come with me when I travel. I have a lot of people say, man, I wish I could carry your suitcases, that sort of thing. And so I decided about 3 years ago to let you come along with me doing my job as a war correspondent, traveling around the world, 25 plus countries a year, and just see what it's like behind the scenes. So here we are. I'm up late editing video from the interviews that I did on today's shoot. And tomorrow morning early, about 3:45, I'm heading to the airport to fly back to Panama. And I may be turning right around and flying right back to go to Ukraine. But I'm waiting on a phone call to see whether or not, I really am hoping that I don't have to go to Ukraine. Russia is really good at rattling the saber, and this is more serious than usual because Russia and China and all of our other adversaries sense the weakness that we have in our foreign policy and our executive branch right now. And so they're taking advantage of that to grab what they can, knowing that we likely won't do much or won't be able to do much, especially after watching what happened in Afghanistan. So I'm hoping that this is not going to be anything that involves the United States. But if there is a war in Ukraine, it's likely that I will go. I've got some interesting angles on that I'm going to be pursuing over the next couple of days. And so I might get a chance to go over there at least for a few days and do some reporting. In the meantime, this last week, I have been in Kentucky reporting on the aftermath and the cleanup from the big tornadoes that happened there after Christmas. And then I've been in West Virginia here, and I've today did shoots, shot some interviews and that sort of thing regarding the unbelievable number of fentanyl overdose deaths that we're seeing, not just in West Virginia, but around the country. In the last 12 months, something like 100,000 Americans have died from fentanyl overdoses. Now, the reason that's a big story is because that fentanyl is coming from China, and China knows that it's pumping it in here. It knows that it's killing American citizens. If China was killing 100,000 Americans a year with their military, we'd be at nuclear levels of war right now. But because they are just pumping poison across our southern border and using that to kill people in the United States, we pretend that it's not an act of war. I would submit that it is an act of war, and that this should be a real deal breaker when it comes to doing business with China. But today I got a chance to interview some experts on the subject, people who are dealing with the fentanyl crisis on the ground right now every day, and an addict who has been a victim of that and literally has died more than once and has been revived by the miracle anti-drug Narcan. And so I want to show you a little bit of what I got today. I hope you have a great weekend. I'm heading back to Panama. Maybe next week I'll be reporting from Ukraine. Please support the podcast. Go to chuckholton.locals.com. I'm putting a lot of extra content up there and giving you a chance to actually make a difference by helping some of the people that we run into along the way. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm Chuck Holton. Have a good one. Title, whatever you want.
My name is James Miller, and I'm the director of the Community Corrections Program for Raleigh County, West Virginia.
Okay, good. Give me a 2-minute rundown of what you're seeing with regards to fentanyl in Raleigh County.
I began this position in 2015. Prior to that, I was law enforcement for 20 years. Starting in 1993, this community had one illicit substance, and that was crack cocaine. Very rarely did we ever see methamphetamine or heroin. And in 2015, when I began this job, we were seeing nothing but heroin. And it's gotten to the point, very rapidly things have changed. Heroin and prescription medication was what we were finding predominantly in all of our drug screens up until about 2018. and the rapid change to methamphetamine. It was like overnight. And I've spoken with investigators in a drug unit to find out why that change took effect so fast. It was because of its economics. The Mexican drug cartel is the predominant supplier of illegal drugs to North America, and it's cheaper and easier to produce methamphetamine than it is heroin. So now we're into a transition from even methamphetamine to fentanyl, because it is, again, easier to produce, because the only thing you have to do is import it. We're comparing that with methamphetamine. You import all of the precursor ingredients, and you have to actually manufacture that drug. But fentanyl can be imported, most of that comes from Asia, predominantly China, and that can be mixed in with any other drug to increase its potency and its likelihood of addiction for the user, or it can be sold simply by itself. And it's very highly sought after as a standalone drug.
What are the effects of fentanyl for the user? Does it have a similar effect to cocaine, or does it similar to heroin, or what? I don't understand.
Okay, cocaine and methamphetamine fall in the family of central nervous system stimulants. They're uppers. Heroin, the drugs like Oxycontin, hydrocodone, those opiate-based medications are central nervous system depressants. And heroin is one of the larger, more predominantly abused drugs in that class, and fentanyl is the most powerful painkiller on the market. And it has the same effects. The physiological effects are slowed heart rate, slowed rate of breathing, and more of a lethargic euphoria. It's not, and that's why methamphetamine users are called tweakers, because they're tweaking, they're on edge all the time. But fentanyl is the most powerful painkiller that's on the market today, and it has a very, very hard effect on the user as far as the slowing of breathing and heart rate.
How does it compare to Oxycontin?
It is, well, Oxycontin was a very powerful drug, but fentanyl is even more potent. It's 100 times more potent than morphine, and it's highly, highly addictive and extremely dangerous to the person who is using that drug. And the only time I heard of fentanyl prior to what we're seeing today in the illicit consumption of fentanyl were fentanyl patches that were readily prescribed for someone who is in the end stages of cancer. Pain is excruciating. Patches can be applied to the skin, and it is a transdermal, slow-release medication. And we had, as a police officer, I had worked cases before where people had died from overdose because they had taken a fentanyl patch, turned it inside out, and chewed on it, trying to get that high. And to keep, most of the time it's to keep from getting dope sick, as it's called, more than it is to get high. But it was killing people probably 15 years ago, but so nothing like today.
How is it, what's the numbers look like now as far as?
Nationwide, last year, the overdose death rate increased about 38%, but the death rate attributed directly to fentanyl increased 58%. So nationwide, it's a huge problem. Here in this community, it is a huge problem. And I don't know how we combat this problem, but the literature that I've read indicates that anyone who is addicted to heroin, upon trying fentanyl for the first time, they want nothing but fentanyl from that point forward, because it is the most intense high that they've gotten. And as I understand things more and more and more, the continued use of heroin, there are two reasons why, or three reasons why. One, the body becomes dependent upon that chemical. Secondly, is the fact that the user is, once that first high occurs, nothing after that compares. It's the peak is the first time they try it, and the effect diminishes. That's why users go from, when the pain pill epidemic was, it was commonly called eating pills. Swallowing the pills, they get high. Then it transitioned into crushing them and snorting them because it was a more direct delivery system. And that's how the needle comes into play. It's not because people want to end up injecting, but it's the most economical way of doing it. What a pill that you would eat before might have been $50, and then it gets to the point where it takes 2 or 3, and then you get to the needle. Well, with fentanyl, that person chasing that heroin high gets the fentanyl high. And once again, you're at a pinnacle where nothing else compares.
What's the cost?
It is, if I'm not mistaken, about $10, $15 per stamp, which is a small dose. And the gram-wise, I'm not sure. I have not worked on that side of things. And those are questions that you can get varied answers to, because some people will discount theirs in order to build a better customer base, just like anything else out here in the free market society.
Tell me how it's being laced into other drugs.
It is, we are finding in our drug screening, almost every methamphetamine positive also has a fentanyl positive. So you're mixing what used to be called an 8-ball, which was mixing heroin and cocaine together. Now we're seeing methamphetamine, which is a stimulant, and fentanyl, which is a depressant, mixed together. And a lot of our clients have no idea that it's even there. And they've never tried fentanyl before. So that makes the drug even more potent when they use that particular methamphetamine, and much more addictive and much harder to break from a psychological standpoint to try to get that person away from that drug. But we're also seeing it in heroin, and it's mixed with heroin, and we're seeing pure fentanyl drug screen results. And those are the ones that shock me, that there is nothing used, but that person is consuming fentanyl.
So I've heard that it takes like enough fentanyl to fit on the head of a pin and kill you or something.
Yes.
So I mean, how
Yes.
can they even do that?
It's a tolerance that's built up, the same as heroin, for example. Someone who has been using heroin for 10, 12 years can consume in one injection enough heroin that would kill the two of us. Their body's built up a tolerance to it, and the same with fentanyl.
But some people are getting it without knowing it, and that's when it kills them.
Yes, yes. In Raleigh County, it's about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago now, we had one particular community had 6 overdoses. And of those 6, 2 passed before EMS could even get to them. And that was heroin laced with fentanyl.
Can you start that again and just say recently instead?
Yes.
Because if it comes out 3 or 4 weeks
Oh, okay.
from now,
Yes, sir. Recently, Raleigh County experienced an episode of overdoses in a particular community where 6 individuals overdosed. And of those 6, 2 passed away from the effects of fentanyl prior to EMS even being able to get to them to administer Narcan or other life-saving practices. And it still is hard for me to wrap my mind around this. I'm not a clinician, but I have to beg myself the question, was that person or those 2 individuals intolerant to the fentanyl, or was it at such a high dose that it even overrode their tolerance to the opiates that they'd been consuming? But obviously they did.
Even know they were taking
Correct. Obviously they did not do it intentionally. And it was a group of friends who had went to a particular place, purchased heroin, and either did not know fentanyl was present or knew it was present, but not at what level. And it almost killed all 6 of them.
Wow, unbelievable. So what kind of overdose numbers are we seeing in West Virginia now?
The numbers fluctuate, and I honestly don't know the numbers. I used to track those as far as grant writing purposes. And it's not only is it difficult, but it takes away from the individual. If I were to think more widely of the numbers in West Virginia or even in Raleigh County as a whole, and think about that volume, it gives me less focus than on the individual and the small community that we have. And so what I steer our team toward is the population we have with us right now. We can't cure the world. No person can, no entity can. But if we focus on the community that we serve and give them everything we've got.
Are the numbers of people you're seeing coming into your program and stuff like that higher than they have been previously?
They are.
Put that in a sentence.
Yes, we've seen a significant uptick in clients in the recent months. We realize that almost every case of substance use disorder also includes a mental health disorder. It's called co-occurring disorders. One of the worst places for someone with a mental health disorder to be is in a jail or a prison. They're untreated and they're being victimized even further by the other inmates and by the institutionalization without care. So we have begun a program where we do go to the jails, interview and identify individuals that we can get out of the jails to serve them through the delivery of substance use therapies and mental health therapies. And that's when we really have started seeing an increase. There's no knowing how many people in the prison system have mental health disorders, but it's significantly high, and I would gather probably 80 to 90%. So with that in mind, you look at the community then and you see people who are out on the streets and obviously using and understand the gravity of the situation. We bring in people from all different avenues, circuit court, magistrate court, through the Department of Health and Human Resources, and through our efforts with the Regional Jail Authority, and the numbers just keep growing.
Wow. What would you say to, this is for the Christian Broadcasting Network, so, people want to know, how can we pray for this issue? I mean, how can people help?
I would like to start a thought that this is not so much as a fentanyl issue or a heroin issue or a methamphetamine issue. This is an addiction issue. Addiction is, in my personal opinion and in some of the literature I've read, that is more attributable to mental health than just about anything else. The types of trauma that our clients have experienced as children or young adults, especially young females when they're in their teens, depression, bipolar disorder, the types of things that people of the Christian Broadcasting Network's audience could look for is increasing awareness of mental health in their communities, understanding that having a mental health disorder does not make someone less of a human being by any means. But if the communities across the nation work more towards addressing mental health disorders, we will have less addiction issues and we will have less violence, because the mental health drives a lot of the violence issues in the nation.
Do you think the pandemic has made that worse?
It has. Unfortunately, the stimulus monies that were distributed throughout the country as a way to address lost income attributed greatly to overdose deaths and to overdose near deaths and millions of relapses. When you have an addict, the old adage that idle hands are a devil's tools is absolutely correct. They can have all of the skills in their skill set available, but the moment they've lost contact with their AA or NA group, with their sponsors, with their therapists, and all of a sudden they've got $1,500 in cash, it destroyed a lot of people.
Wow.
So the pandemic has contributed greatly to overdose deaths and relapses. Wow. And that was, I'm sure no one's prediction that would ever happen, but it has.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an incredible point. I read that there's been a huge spike in the number of deaths last year between 18 and 49 years old, and that's not attributable to COVID directly.
Yes.
And that must be part of it.
It is part of it, and again, it's mental illness. There are some mental illnesses that never, ever manifest until an individual's in their early to mid-20s. I work with veterans on a regular basis who are addicted to controlled substances that is attributable to combat. And we have some others who did not even make it that far into their military service. They were identified as having a mental health disorder after they were screened and admitted and indoctrinated. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. There are many ways to become addicted, and there are many ways to overdose and die once you are in that demographic.
Wow. You said most of this fentanyl comes in directly.
Yes.
It's not made here.
Yes.
So it's safer from that perspective. It's easier and it's more economical.
Yes.
And it's coming in by the ton.
Yes.
Across the southern border.
Yes. And I would say also, it's not necessarily across the southern border. There are smugglers that bring things across, mules as they're called. But the vast majority of the illicit drugs that enter the United States enter through the Southern California area. They come, the border sticks out, the fence sticks out into the ocean a few yards, but it's so easy to bring a ship or boats, whatever, around the fence and onto an abandoned beach late at night, right, or into a major port inside these huge shipping containers, and literally tons and tons at a time.
Yeah, they just picked up 1,700 pounds of it coming across the U.S. southern border. Of pure fentanyl.
Yes.
That's enough to kill every American like 5 times over.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But to imagine that much fentanyl is consumed by such a small portion of our society is what's even more amazing.
Oh man, it's incredible. It's really an act of war.
It is.
China is intentionally murdering 100,000 Americans a year. And
yes.
If they did that with their army, we'd be at nuclear level war.
You're absolutely correct.
But they do it every year, and it's like,
absolutely,
if they're at war with us and we pretend it doesn't exist, it's like, it's
right,
never going to end. They're going
right.
to rot our country.
If our enemies can destroy our youth who fight our wars, then they've already won the battle.